You need to see this. Don't come alone. Those were the words my contractor said when he called from my dead wife's office. 8 months after Ellen's funeral, I'd finally decided to renovate the room she'd always wanted to fix up. What Jake found behind those walls changed everything I thought I knew about my family. 3 years ago, I threw my own son out of the house because I thought he was a thief. For 3 years, I believed my younger boy Austin had stolen $185,000 from our family business. For 3 years, I refused his phone calls, returned his letters unopened, and told neighbors he had made his choices. My older son, Ted, successful banker, MBA graduate, the son who'd never disappointed me, had brought me the evidence. Bank statements, transfer records, documentation that painted Austin as a calculating embezzler who'd betrayed the family that trusted him. The proof was overwhelming. The conclusion was obvious. I was completely wrong. My name is Doug Mitchell. I'm 64, spent 40 years as a bank compliance officer, and I thought I knew how to spot financial fraud. I thought I could read people, especially my own children. I thought family loyalty meant believing the son who brought evidence over the son who couldn't explain it. But when Jake Sullivan called me that Thursday afternoon, his voice shaking as he stood in Ellen's office, I knew my understanding of everything was about to shatter. Mr. Mitchell, your wife, she was recording everything. There's equipment back here, surveillance files, evidence that's been hidden for years. But someone's been accessing these files recently. Someone who knows about the renovation. You see, Ellen had been investigating. For months before she died, she'd been collecting proof about what was really happening in our house. She'd discovered who was actually stealing from us, who was lying to us, and who was systematically destroying our family from the inside. She'd also discovered something that got her killed, like a chess game where I'd been protecting the wrong piece while my opponent planned checkmate. Now, with Ellen's final moves revealed behind her office wall, I had one chance to turn the board around. But the person who'd been deceiving me for 3 years wasn't going to give up quietly. And Jake's warning, "Don't come alone," suddenly made terrifying sense. This story has more twists than a federal investigation, more buried secrets than a crime scene, and a family betrayal that nearly died with my wife. It's about what happens when you discover the child you trusted was your family's greatest threat, and the child you rejected was trying to save you all along. If you've ever had that instinct that something doesn't feel right in your own home, you need to hear what we found in that hidden room. Because sometimes the truth is literally buried in the walls. Before she died, my wife mentioned something about renovating her home office. For the future, she said. I never understood what she meant. The room had been locked since her funeral. I couldn't bear to go in there. But recently, something pushed me to finally honor her wish. I called Sullivan Construction. Jake Sullivan, the owner, had done work for neighbors before. Good reputation, fair prices, and he understood that some jobs carry more weight than just fixing walls. "Mr. Mitchell," Jake said when he came by for the estimate, "I want you to know I'll treat this space with respect. I know this isn't just another renovation." That was 3 weeks ago. Jake started the work last Monday. By Wednesday, he'd stripped the old wallpaper and was preparing to install new built-in shelving where my wife's bookcase used to stand. Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Jake Sullivan. I need you to come over to the house." "Is there a problem with the work?" "No, sir, but I found something behind the wall that you need to see. And Mr. Mitchell," his voice dropped, "don't come alone." I sat in my car outside the house for 10 minutes, staring at the windows of what used to be her office. Jake's truck was in the driveway, but I could see him waiting by the front door instead of working inside. Whatever he'd found, it was significant enough to stop a professional contractor in his tracks. Jake met me at the door with a look I recognized from my banking days, the same expression people wore when they discovered fraud in their accounts. "Mr. Mitchell, before we go in there, I need to ask you something. Did your wife ever mention installing any kind of security system?" Beat 2. Backstory and family fracture, 901 900 words. 3 years ago, I had 2 sons. Theodore, Ted, was 35 then, a rising star at Pacific Northwest Bank. Austin was 32, helping me manage the family's small property investment business that my wife and I had built over 20 years. The business wasn't complicated. We owned 4 rental properties, managed them ourselves, and Austin handled the bookkeeping while I dealt with tenants and maintenance. It was steady income that would supplement our retirement and eventually pass to both boys. Ted had always been the ambitious one. MBA from Portland State, sharp dresser, drove a BMW that seemed expensive for a bank employee's salary. But he was climbing the ladder fast. Senior vice president by 35, managing high net worth client accounts. Austin was different, quieter, more methodical. He'd studied computer science, but never finished his degree. Instead, he'd come to work with us, said he preferred working with family to corporate life. My wife doted on him. Austin sees things other people miss, she used to say. I should have listened to her. The problem started in March, 3 years ago. Ted called me on a Thursday evening, his voice tight with what sounded like genuine concern. Dad, I hate to bring this up, but I've been looking at the business accounts. There are some irregularities I think you should know about. What kind of irregularities? Money moving in ways that don't match the rental income patterns. Austin's been handling all the deposits, right? That weekend, Ted came over with a briefcase full of printouts. Bank statements, deposit records, transaction histories. He spread them across the kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. Look at this, he said, pointing to a series of withdrawals. $185,000 over 8 months, always in amounts just under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting requirements. The numbers were there, withdrawals I hadn't authorized, deposits that didn't match our rental income, transfers to accounts I'd never seen before. Maybe there's an explanation, I said. Dad, I work in banking. This is textbook embezzlement. When I confronted Austin, his reaction troubled me. He didn't protest his innocence with the outrage I expected. Instead, he got quiet, almost resigned. Dad, I know how this looks. Then explain it. I can't. Not in a way you'll believe. That response felt like a confession. Ted was showing me bank records, official documentation. Austin was asking me to trust him based on nothing but faith. My wife tried to intervene. Doug, this doesn't make sense. Austin wouldn't steal from us. Honey, the evidence is right here. Evidence can be manipulated. But Ted had answers for everything. The account numbers led to cash withdrawals. The timing coincided with Austin's access to the business checkbook. When I asked Austin directly if he'd taken the money, he looked me in the eye and said, I never stole from this family. Not exactly a denial. The final confrontation happened on a Sunday evening in April. Ted had brought more documents, evidence that Austin had opened the suspect accounts using forged signatures. I'm sorry, Dad, Ted said. I hoped I was wrong. Austin stood in our living room, the same room where we'd celebrated his high school graduation, where he'd told us he wanted to work with the family business instead of finishing college. Austin, I said, if you took this money, we can work something out. We can get you help. I didn't take anything. Then where is it? I don't know. You don't know? Ted's voice cracked with what sounded like pain. Austin, just admit it. Make this easier on everyone. But my wife was crying. There has to be an explanation. But there wasn't. At least not one Austin could provide. I told him to leave. Pack his things, get out of the house, and don't come back until he could tell me the truth about where our money went. Austin packed one suitcase. He hugged his mother. She was already sick then, though we didn't know how sick, and walked out to his beat-up Honda. At the door, he turned back. Dad, I love this family. I would never hurt it. Then tell me what happened to the money. Someday you'll know. That was the last conversation I had with my younger son. Ted helped me file a police report, though we ultimately decided not to press charges. Family business, I told the detective. We'll handle it internally. Austin's phone number was disconnected within a month. Ted said he'd heard Austin had left Oregon entirely. My wife never got over it. She'd bring up Austin's name, wondering where he was, if he was safe, if we'd done the right thing. Her health declined rapidly after that. Stress, the doctors said. Grief does terrible things to the body. She died believing we'd failed one of our children. Now, standing in her office doorway, I wondered if we'd failed them both. Beat 3. Discovery begins. 720 words. Security system? I followed Jake into the office, noticing how he'd carefully covered the furniture with drop cloths. She never mentioned anything like that. Well, she had one. Jake led me to the far wall, where her bookshelf used to stand. A sophisticated one. Where the old built-in bookcase had been, Jake had opened up a section of wall to install new shelving. But instead of empty wall cavity, there was a steel-lined room about the size of a large closet. I thought it was just dead space at first, Jake said. But when I started removing the drywall, I found this. He gestured to a heavy steel door painted to match the wall. It's not just a hidden room, Mr. Mitchell. It's a server room. Inside, humming quietly, was equipment I didn't recognize. Multiple computer towers, monitors, what looked like recording devices, and rows of hard drives with blinking lights. The power lines run behind the walls, Jake explained. Your wife had this professionally installed. This wasn't a DIY project. I stared at the setup. My wife, who used to call me to help her restart her email, had somehow orchestrated this level of technical sophistication. Jake, I need to ask you something, as a professional. How long would this have taken to install? Based on the construction, 6 to 8 months? Minimum. And it would have cost, well, probably $30,000 to $40,000. 8 months. She'd been planning this before she got sick, before Austin left, before everything fell apart. There's more, Mr. Mitchell. Jake's expression grew troubled. The system is still running, active. Whatever your wife was recording, it's been recording for months. Recording what? I'm not sure, but look at this. Jake pointed to a small monitor displaying what appeared to be a login screen. Someone's been accessing this system recently. These timestamps show logins from 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. Right around the time I'd decided to renovate the office. Jake, who else knows about this? Just you and me. I sealed the opening back up temporarily until you could see it. I studied the screen. The timestamp read, last login, March 15th, 2:47 a.m. 3 weeks ago, someone had been in the system at almost 3 in the morning. Mr. Mitchell, there's something else. When I was checking the electrical connections, I found these. Jake handed me a manila folder that had been sitting on one of the equipment shelves. Inside were surveillance camera specifications, installation diagrams, and purchase receipts, all dated 8 months before my wife died. But the most interesting document was a handwritten note in my wife's careful script. Douglas, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and you've finally decided to renovate the office like I asked. The truth about Austin is in the encrypted files. Password is your father's middle name plus the year we married. Trust no one else with this information until you know everything. Love always, Ellen. My father's middle name was James. We married in 1987, but Ellen had been dead for 8 months. How had she known I'd find this? Jake, I need you to finish covering this up for now. Can you do that? Of course. But Mr. Mitchell, if your wife was recording something in this house, and someone's been accessing the system, what are you thinking? I'm thinking whoever was in this system 3 weeks ago might come back, especially if they know you're renovating. I looked at the login timestamp again. 2:47 a.m. on March 15th, 3 days after I'd called Sullivan Construction to schedule the estimate. Someone had known about the renovation, and they'd accessed my wife's secret system in the middle of the night. Jake, when you seal this up, can you make it look like you never found it? Yes, sir. Good. And Jake, don't mention this to anyone. Not your crew, not your wife, not anyone. Understood. As we prepared to leave the office, Jake stopped at the doorway. Mr. Mitchell, there's one more thing. Those recent login attempts, they weren't just viewing files. According to the access logs, someone's been deleting them. Beat 4, Evidence Revelation, 897, 900 words. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with Ellen's note, staring at her handwriting until the words blurred together. James, 987. A password she'd chosen specifically for me, combining my father's memory with the beginning of our marriage. At 11 p.m., I drove back to the house. Jake had done excellent work concealing the hidden room. You'd never know it existed unless you were looking for it. I entered the password on the system login screen, and Ellen's world opened up to me. The main directory contained 127 hours of video files, organized by date and time. Motion-activated recording, starting 14 months ago, a month before Austin's troubles began. The earliest files showed normal family activity. Austin working at the desk in the office, managing rental property paperwork, me coming in occasionally to check on business documents, Ted visiting for Sunday dinners, staying late to discuss family finances. But as I progressed through the timeline, patterns emerged. The first red flag was a video from February 15th, 3 years ago. Austin had left for the day, but Ted returned to the house at 8:30 p.m., using a key I'd given him for emergencies. On the recording, Ted went straight to Austin's desk and spent 40 minutes photographing documents with his phone. In another file from 2 weeks later, Ted could be seen placing manila folders in Austin's desk drawer, documents I didn't recognize. When I compared this timestamp to Austin's work schedule, my younger son had been out of town that weekend, visiting his girlfriend in Seattle. But the most damning evidence was in a file dated March 10th, just days before Ted brought me the proof of Austin's embezzlement. In the recording, Ted sat at Austin's desk with a laptop and what appeared to be official bank forms. Over the course of 2 hours, he methodically created documents, printed them, and filed them in the same folders he'd planted weeks earlier. When he was finished, he called someone on his phone. "It's done," he said to whoever answered. "I've got enough documentation to bury him. Yeah, the account transfers look completely authentic. Dad will have to believe it." The system had audio recording capability. I spent the next 3 hours reviewing files, taking notes, cross-referencing dates with my memory of events. Ellen's surveillance had captured everything: Ted planting evidence, creating false bank records, even rehearsing his presentation to me with someone on speakerphone. "Make sure you sound reluctant," the voice on the phone advised. "Like you hate bringing this to your father's attention." "I've got it handled," Ted replied. "Austin won't be able to explain any of this because he doesn't know it exists." By 2 a.m., I had documented proof that my older son had systematically framed my younger son for embezzlement he never committed. But I also had something else: bank records showing Ted's actual crime. Hidden in the encrypted files was a folder labeled Pacific Northwest Bank, Client Account Analysis. Ellen had somehow obtained records showing Ted's access to high-net-worth client accounts and systematic withdrawals that totaled $830,126 over 24 months. The money Austin was accused of stealing hadn't come from our family business. It had come from Ted's bank clients, wealthy retirees who trusted him with their investments. Ellen's notes explained her investigation. Ted has been embezzling from elderly clients at the bank. When he realized Austin's computer skills might help him detect the fraud, he decided to eliminate Austin from the family and the business. The planted evidence makes Austin look guilty while drawing attention away from Ted's real crime. My wife had spent months building a case against our older son, documenting his systematic destruction of our family. But she'd died before she could tell me. Now I understood why Austin couldn't defend himself. How do you prove you didn't do something when the evidence against you is expertly fabricated? Austin's resignation hadn't been guilt. It had been helplessness. But as I reviewed the system logs, Jake's warning echoed in my mind. Someone had been accessing these files recently, and according to the activity reports, they'd been systematically deleting evidence. Over the past 3 weeks, someone had removed nearly 40% of Ellen's surveillance files. The most damaging recordings of Ted planting evidence were gone. The audio files of his phone conversations had been corrupted. Someone knew about Ellen's system. Someone had been working to destroy the evidence she'd collected. I checked the remaining access logs more carefully. The deletions hadn't been random. They'd been strategic. Whoever was erasing files knew exactly what they were looking for. The most recent access had been 2 days ago. March 20th, 3:17 a.m. The same night Jake had called to tell me about finding the hidden room. Someone had accessed the system after Jake's discovery, which meant someone was monitoring the renovation watching for threats to their secret. As I prepared to leave, I noticed one more detail that stopped me cold. According to the system logs, the user who'd been deleting files had administrative access, the kind of access that would require Ellen's master password. But Ellen was dead, which meant someone else knew her password, or they'd found another way into the system. I copied the remaining files to a portable drive and carefully logged out. But as I prepared to leave Ellen's office, I realized the truth was even worse than I'd thought. Ted didn't just know about the surveillance system, he'd been using it. Beat 5. Investigation deepens. 1084 1080 words. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with the copied files, learning things about my family that shattered 38 years of assumptions. Ellen hadn't just been investigating Ted's embezzlement. She'd been tracking his entire pattern of manipulation, going back years. Her notes revealed a methodical sociopath who'd been playing the long game since college. Ted's student loans were paid off by scholarships that don't exist, one note read, cross-referenced with Portland state records. No scholarship matching the amounts or dates he claimed. Query: where did the money really come from? Another entry, dated 6 months before Austin's troubles. Ted asked unusually detailed questions about Austin's computer skills and access to family business records. Seemed particularly interested in Austin's ability to detect financial irregularities. Ellen had seen the setup coming. She'd recognized that Ted was positioning Austin as a threat that needed to be eliminated. But the most disturbing discovery was in a folder labeled Bank Client Files. Ellen had somehow obtained internal records from Pacific Northwest Bank, showing Ted's systematic theft from elderly clients. Mrs. Dorothy Hoffman, 78, widow, $127,000 diverted from a retirement account over 8 months. Mr. James Peterson, 82, dementia patient, $156,000 transferred to accounts he never authorized. The Kowalski Family Trust, $203,000 embezzled during the settling of an estate. Ted hadn't just stolen from our family business. He'd been robbing vulnerable elderly clients who trusted him with their life savings. The total exceeded $830,000, and Ellen's notes suggested it was ongoing. At 6 a.m., I called Austin's last known phone number, knowing it had been disconnected for years. But I had to start somewhere. I tried searching social media, called old friends, even contacted his former girlfriend in Seattle. Nothing. Austin had vanished, as thoroughly as if Ted had erased him from existence. By afternoon, I'd made a decision that would have seemed impossible 24 hours earlier. I called the FBI. I need to report bank fraud, I told the agent who answered. Sir, you'll need to contact the bank directly for... This involves embezzlement from elderly clients and falsified evidence in a family dispute. I have surveillance video and financial records. That got their attention. Special Agent Linda Brennan arrived at my house 2 hours later. Mid-40s, professional, with the kind of quiet intensity I recognized from my banking career, someone who'd seen enough financial crime to take every allegation seriously. Mr. Mitchell, before we proceed, I need you to understand that federal bank fraud charges are serious business. If you're making accusations against a family member, there's no going back once we start this investigation. Agent Brennan, my son has been embezzling from elderly bank clients for over 2 years. He framed his brother for a crime he didn't commit, destroyed our family, and may have contributed to my wife's death from stress. I showed her Ellen's files, the surveillance footage, the deleted evidence logs. Agent Brennan studied the documentation for an hour, occasionally asking clarifying questions or requesting additional details. Mr. Mitchell, this is substantial evidence, but I need to ask, why didn't your wife come forward with this information while she was alive? I think she was afraid. Ted is smart, manipulative, and he had access to bank security systems. She probably worried about what he might do if he felt cornered. According to these logs, someone's been actively deleting evidence from her system. Yes, and they've been doing it since I started planning the renovation. Agent Brennan made notes. That suggests ongoing criminal activity. not just past embezzlement, but active obstruction of justice. We spent another hour going through the technical details. The surveillance system had captured Ted using his own laptop to access bank systems from our family office, transferring client funds to accounts under false names. The challenge, Agent Brennan explained, is that much of the most damaging evidence has been deleted. What remains is compelling, but a defense attorney could argue the files were selectively edited. What do you recommend? We need to catch him in the act. If Ted is still accessing your wife's system to delete evidence, we can set up monitoring to catch him doing it. You want to use me as bait. I want to use the renovation as bait. If Ted knows about the ongoing construction, he'll be worried about discovery. We can create circumstances that force him to access the system, and this time we'll be watching. The plan was straightforward. I would call Ted, mention finding some of Ellen's old files during the renovation, and suggest we should go through them together. If he was monitoring the surveillance system or planning to delete more evidence, this would force his hand. Mr. Mitchell, I have to warn you, if we're right about Ted's involvement in evidence destruction, confronting him could be dangerous. People who've committed this level of financial crime don't usually go quietly. What about Austin? Do you think you can find him? We'll start a search immediately. If he's been living under an assumed name or avoiding contact to protect himself, we have resources to locate him. As Agent Brennan prepared to leave, she handed me a small device. This is a recording device. If Ted contacts you directly, especially if he wants to meet, I need you to wear this. Given the level of planning involved in framing Austin, I suspect Ted has contingency plans we haven't discovered yet. That evening I made the call. Ted, it's your father. I need to talk to you about something Ellen left behind. Dad, hey. What kind of something? Files. Records. I found them during the office renovation. I paused, letting the implications settle. Some of them mention Austin. Silence on the line. Long enough to confirm my suspicions. Dad, maybe I should come over. We should look at those files together. That would be good, son. I'll be there tomorrow evening. And Dad, don't discuss this with anyone else until I get there. Some of Ellen's investigations might not be accurate. I'd hate for you to jump to the wrong conclusions. After hanging up, I realized Ted had just confirmed everything. He knew about Ellen's investigations, knew they contained information about Austin, and was already working to control the narrative. But what he didn't know was that this time someone would be watching him. Beat 6. Confrontation. Prep in Austin found, 1 through 79, 1,080 words. Agent Brennan called the next morning with news that changed everything. We found Austin Mitchell. He's alive, but Mr. Mitchell, your son has been living in homeless shelters for the past 2 years. The address she gave me was for Portland Rescue Mission downtown, a place I'd driven past 1,000 times without thinking about the people inside. He's been using a different name, Austin James, but we matched fingerprints from a previous arrest. Minor charges, mostly related to sleeping in public spaces. Arrest? Your son's been living rough, Mr. Mitchell. People in his situation sometimes get picked up for trespassing, loitering. Nothing serious, but it confirms his circumstances. I sat in my car outside the shelter for 20 minutes, trying to process the image of my son sleeping in a building with strangers, eating meals served by volunteers, carrying his possessions in a backpack. The volunteer at the front desk was a young woman with kind eyes who'd obviously had this conversation before. You're looking for Austin, James? He's here, but I have to ask, are you family? Sometimes people want to find our residents for reasons that aren't helpful. I'm his father. Her expression softened. He talks about his family sometimes. I think he'd want to see you. Austin was in what they called the common room, a large space with mismatched furniture and a television playing quietly in the corner. He was reading a paperback book, and for a moment I saw the boy who used to spend hours in his room with computers and novels. Then he looked up and saw me. The recognition was instant, followed immediately by something that looked like fear. Dad? 3 years of living on the streets had aged him in ways that made my chest tight. His clothes were clean but worn, his face thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were the same, still intelligent, still gentle. Austin, son. I didn't know what else to say. What are you doing here? Looking for you. I know the truth now. He studied my face for a long moment, then gestured to a table in the corner where we could talk privately. Austin, I need you to know something first. Your mother knew. Before she died, she knew Ted had framed you. Mom knew? She was investigating. She had surveillance equipment installed in her office, recorded everything. I found it 3 days ago. Austin closed his eyes. I wondered why she kept asking me questions about the bank records, like she was testing whether I was lying. Why didn't you tell me the truth when I confronted you? Dad, Ted showed you bank statements, transfer records, documentation that looked completely real. What was I supposed to say? My brother made it all up? You would have thought I was desperate. You could have tried. I did try. I asked you to trust me, remember? But you needed proof, and Ted had proof. I just had my word. We sat in silence for a moment, watching other residents come and go, men and women carrying stories I couldn't imagine. Austin, there's something else. Ted knows about Mom's surveillance system. He's been deleting evidence, and we think he might be planning to eliminate the remaining files. Or eliminate the remaining witness. What do you mean? Dad, Ted didn't just frame me for embezzlement. He made sure I'd have no credibility if I ever tried to come forward. Homeless ex-con claims his successful brother framed him. Who would believe that? Austin was right. Ted's plan had been designed for the long term, ensuring that even if the truth emerged, the messenger would be discredited. Son, I need to ask you something important. The FBI is involved now. They want to catch Ted in the act, but it means confronting him directly. Are you willing to help? Austin looked around the shelter, at the life Ted's scheme had forced him into. What do you need me to do? I explained Agent Brennan's plan. Ted was coming to the house that evening to review Ellen's files. We'd be wearing recording devices, and the FBI would be monitoring. If Ted attempted to access the surveillance system to delete more evidence, they'd have him on multiple federal charges. But Austin, I need you to understand the risk. If Ted realizes we know the truth, Dad, I've been hiding for 3 years. I've been afraid to use my real name, afraid to contact anyone from our old life, afraid Ted would find out where I was, and Austin shrugged. I'm tired of being afraid. What were you afraid Ted would do? Kill me. Austin said it matter-of-factly. Dad, Ted stole over $800,000 from bank clients. He destroyed our family to cover it up. You think he'd hesitate to eliminate the one person who might figure out his scheme? The shelter volunteer approached our table. Austin, there's a phone call for you at the front desk. Austin and I exchanged looks. He'd been using a false name, had no permanent address. Who would be calling him here? Did they say who it was? Just that it was family business. Austin stood slowly. Dad, I haven't told anyone I was here, and the only family who knew this name was Ted. We followed the volunteer to the front desk, where an old cordless phone waited. Austin picked up the receiver. Hello? I could hear Ted's voice, even from 3 feet away. Austin, brother, I hear Dad's been looking for you. How did you find me? I've always known where you were. Hard to disappear completely in the digital age. Austin's hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? I want you to stay exactly where you are. Don't go home. Don't contact Dad. Don't do anything stupid. Because if you do, I'll make sure your life gets a lot worse than sleeping in shelters. The line went dead. Austin set the phone down carefully, his face pale. Dad, we need to call Agent Brennan. Ted's not just deleting evidence. What do you mean? He's been watching me for 3 years, which means he knows exactly how to find me. As if summoned by our conversation, Austin's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Family meeting tonight. Don't disappoint Dad again. Beat 7. Dark Revelation and Escalation. 1,170 words. Agent Brennan arrived at the shelter within 30 minutes, accompanied by 2 other federal agents. The urgency in their movement told me we'd crossed into dangerous territory. Mr. Mitchell, we have a problem, she said after reviewing Austin's phone records. Your son Ted has been monitoring Austin's location through digital surveillance for at least 18 months. She showed us printed records, cell phone tower data, shelter check-in systems, even Austin's library card usage. He's been tracking Austin's movements systematically. This isn't casual monitoring, it's professional-grade surveillance. Austin studied the data. That explains how he always seemed to know when I tried to contact old friends or apply for jobs. Every time I started to rebuild my life, something would go wrong. What kind of something? I asked. Potential employers would suddenly withdraw job offers. People I'd reconnected with would stop returning calls. I thought I was paranoid, but Ted was sabotaging your rehabilitation, Agent Brennan concluded. He needed you discredited and isolated. But the surveillance records revealed something more sinister. Ted hadn't just been watching Austin. He'd been documenting a pattern of behavior that could be used against him. Look at this timeline, Agent Brennan pointed to a series of timestamps. Ted has records of every time Austin visited medical clinics, soup kitchens, job placement centers. He's been building a profile. A profile for what? Character assassination. If Austin ever tried to come forward with accusations, Ted would have documentation of mental health struggles, substance abuse treatment, criminal citations. A perfect way to destroy Austin's credibility in court. The scope of Ted's planning was breathtaking. For 3 years, he'd been orchestrating Austin's destruction while positioning himself as the responsible son who'd tried to help his troubled brother. But there's something else, Agent Brennan continued. We've been monitoring Ted's financial activity since yesterday. In the past 24 hours, he's liquidated over $200,000 in investments. Flight risk? Or elimination risk? People don't liquidate assets that quickly unless they're planning to disappear or pay for something expensive. Austin had been sitting quietly, processing the information. Now he looked up with an expression I didn't recognize. Agent Brennan, you said Ted's been tracking me for 18 months. But the surveillance on Mom's system shows deletions going back 3 weeks. That timing isn't coincidental. What are you thinking? Ted didn't just randomly discover Mom's system. He's known about it since she was alive. Which means... Austin paused, and I saw him reach the same conclusion that was forming in my mind. Which means he knows Mom was investigating him before she died. Agent Brennan leaned forward. Are you suggesting Ted had direct knowledge of your mother's investigation while she was still alive? I'm suggesting more than that. Austin's voice was steady, but I could hear the controlled anger underneath. Dad, what did the doctors say caused Mom's heart attack? Sudden cardiac failure. They said it was stress-related, possibly genetic. Did they do a toxicology screen? Austin, what are you saying? I'm saying Ted had 800,000 reasons to make sure Mom never revealed what she knew. And he had access to bank clients who were elderly, vulnerable, and dying under what appeared to be natural circumstances. The room fell silent as the implications settled. Agent Brennan spoke carefully. Austin, that's a very serious accusation. It's also the only explanation that makes sense. Ted knew about the surveillance system because Mom confronted him before she died. That's why she never showed the evidence to Dad. She didn't get the chance. I thought about Ellen's final weeks, how tired she'd seemed, how she'd insisted on getting her affairs in order. At the time, I'd attributed it to her declining health. Now I wondered if she'd been preparing for something else. Agent Brennan, is it possible to have Ellen's body exhumed for additional testing? It's possible, but we'd need substantial evidence to justify that level of investigation. Austin pulled out his phone and began scrolling through old messages. Dad, do you remember Mom's last doctor's appointment? March 15th, 2 years ago. Dr. Williams said her heart rhythm was irregular, but not immediately dangerous. Right, but she died 4 days later, and according to these surveillance logs, Ted accessed Mom's system for the first time on March 16th, the day after her doctor's appointment. Agent Brennan studied the timeline. You're suggesting Ted learned about your mother's investigation and acted within 72 hours? I'm suggesting Ted went to Mom's final doctor's appointment with her, learned she wasn't immediately dying, and realized he was running out of time. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Ellen's sudden decline, Ted's immediate insistence on cremation, his careful management of funeral arrangements that prevented a thorough examination. There's one way to find out, Austin said. Dad, did Mom ever mention feeling dizzy or nauseous in her final days, especially after taking her heart medication? I tried to remember. She complained about her pills making her feel strange, said they didn't seem right. Agent Brennan, Ted works in banking, but he also has access to estate planning services for wealthy clients, including clients who might have unconventional medication needs. You're talking about digitalis poisoning, Agent Brennan said quietly. What's digitalis? A heart medication that's therapeutic in small doses, fatal in large ones, difficult to detect post-mortem unless you're specifically looking for it. Austin nodded, and almost impossible to distinguish from natural heart failure in an elderly patient. Agent Brennan closed her notebook. Mr. Mitchell, I need both of you to understand something. If these accusations are correct, we're not just dealing with financial fraud. We're investigating potential murder. What does that mean for tonight's meeting with Ted? It means we can't let you confront him alone. If Ted killed your wife to protect his secret, he won't hesitate to eliminate both of you. As if on cue, my phone rang. Ted's name appeared on the display. Agent Brennan gestured for me to answer while she prepared recording equipment. Dad, I've been thinking about those files Mom left. Maybe we should handle this family business privately, without outside interference. What do you mean? I mean, Austin should be there too. Time for our family to have an honest conversation about the past. The line went dead. Austin looked at me with an expression that mixed fear and determination. He knows we found each other. Agent Brennan's phone buzzed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, then looked up with grave concern. Gentlemen, we have a more immediate problem. Ted Mitchell just purchased a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands. Departure tomorrow morning. A beat 8. Legal trap setup. 718, 720 words. He's running, I said. Or he's planning to run after tonight, Agent Brennan corrected. Mr. Mitchell, I need you to understand something. Ted is no longer just covering up financial fraud. He's eliminating evidence and witnesses before fleeing the country. We moved the operation to the FBI field office, where Agent Brennan's team had set up a comprehensive surveillance plan. Here's what we know, she said, pointing to a wall of documentation. Ted has liquidated $200,000 in assets, purchased international travel documents, and made contact with both of you within hours. He's operating on an accelerated timeline. What's the plan? We wire both of you for the meeting. FBI tactical team positions around your house. If Ted attempts to access your wife's surveillance system to delete evidence, we have grounds for immediate arrest. Austin studied the tactical plan. What if he doesn't go for the system? What if he just tries to eliminate the problem? That's why you'll both be wearing panic buttons in addition to recording devices. Any sign of immediate threat, we move in. Agent Brennan handed us each a small device. These are audio transmitters, completely undetectable, broadcast range of half a mile. Everything Ted says will be recorded. The technical briefing took 2 hours. Hand signals, code words, positioning within the house to maintain optimal recording quality, and tactical team response. Mr. Mitchell, I need you to guide the conversation toward the missing money and Austin's framing. If Ted admits to either crime on tape, we can arrest him immediately. What about Mom's death? Austin asked. One step at a time. Financial fraud is easier to prove quickly. If we can establish those charges, we can hold him while investigating the more serious allegations. At 4 p.m., we drove to the house in separate vehicles. The FBI team had positioned surveillance equipment throughout the property, invisible monitoring that would capture everything. Agent Brennan walked through the house one final time, checking sightlines and communication equipment. Remember, your goal is to keep Ted talking. Let him explain, let him justify, let him incriminate himself. Don't accuse, just ask questions and let his ego do the rest. Austin stood in the living room where I'd confronted him 3 years earlier. Dad, are you sure you want to do this? We could just turn the evidence over to the FBI and let them handle the arrest. Son, I need to hear him admit what he did. I need to understand how I could have been so blind. At 6 p.m., Ted's BMW pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I watched my older son approach the house with a confident stride that had always impressed me. Successful, well-dressed, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than most people made in a month. He knocked twice, then used his key to enter. Dad? Austin? Ted's voice carried the same warm, concerned tone he'd used 3 years ago when destroying his brother's life. We met him in the living room. Ted's expression when he saw Austin was carefully controlled. Surprise, but not shock. Austin, you look... Different. 3 years of homelessness will do that. Ted set his briefcase on the coffee table with deliberate precision. Dad, I think there might be some misunderstanding about what Mom's files contain. I'd like to review them before we draw any conclusions. What kind of misunderstanding? Well, Mom was sick toward the end. Sometimes elderly people develop paranoid thoughts, especially about family finances. Austin's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Ted, these aren't paranoid thoughts. They're surveillance recordings. Video evidence. Of what? I studied his face carefully. Of you planting evidence in Austin's desk. Of you creating fake bank records. Of you admitting to someone on the phone that you were framing your brother. Ted's expression didn't change, but I noticed his hand move slightly toward his briefcase. Dad, I think you need to be very careful about believing everything you see. Digital evidence can be manipulated, especially by someone with Austin's computer skills. So you're saying Austin faked surveillance footage of you framing him? I'm saying someone with technical expertise and a grudge might create convincing evidence to support their story. Austin finally spoke. Ted, where's the $800,000 you stole from bank clients? The room went silent. Ted's mask of concern finally slipped, replaced by something cold and calculating. Austin, you always were too smart for your own good. Agent Brennan's voice crackled softly in our earpieces. We have admission, moving to arrest positions. But Ted was already reaching into his briefcase. Beat 9, climactic confrontation, 903, 900 words. Ted's hand emerged from the briefcase holding not a weapon, but a tablet computer. I thought you might have questions about the money, he said calmly, so I brought some documentation. He set the tablet on the coffee table and began pulling up files. Dad, the truth is more complicated than Austin's making it sound. Yes, I moved money from client accounts. But it wasn't theft. It was emergency intervention. What do you mean? These clients, elderly people, some with dementia, some being manipulated by their own families. I was protecting their assets from predatory relatives. Ted's explanation was smooth, practiced, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed every detail. Mrs. Hoffman, for example, her son was draining her account for gambling debts. I moved her money to a secure trust to protect her. Without her permission? Dad, she has Alzheimer's. She can't give informed consent. Someone had to protect her. Austin leaned forward. Ted, that's not what Mom's recordings show. Mom's recordings. Ted's voice turned sharp. Let's talk about those recordings, shall we? He stood and walked toward the office door. Austin, did you know Mom was surveilling our entire family? Recording private conversations? Monitoring our personal business? Do you know how sick that is? She was investigating financial fraud. She was paranoid, elderly, sick, convinced her own family was stealing from her. Ted's voice took on a tone of practiced sympathy. Dad, I tried to get her help, professional counseling, but she refused. I watched Ted's performance with growing disgust. Even now, even with the evidence against him, he was manipulating the narrative. That's why you accessed her surveillance system, I said, to delete evidence of your real crimes. Ted smiled. I accessed her system to understand the scope of her paranoia, to see what kind of false accusations she might make. And what did you find? I found surveillance footage of me doing my job, protecting elderly clients from financial abuse. I found recordings of family conversations taken without consent. I found evidence of Mom's deteriorating mental state. Austin stood up. You found evidence that she knew you were embezzling. Austin, you spent 3 years homeless because you couldn't accept responsibility for your actions. Are you really going to blame me for your problems now? I'm going to blame you for framing me. Ted walked to the office door and pushed it open. Then let's go look at this evidence together. Dad, I think you need to see exactly what Mom was doing in that room. Agent Brennan's voice whispered in our earpieces. He's going for the system. All units ready. We followed Ted into the office. Jake Sullivan's renovation had left the room partially finished, but Ted walked directly to the wall where the hidden room was concealed. Jake did nice work covering this up, Ted said casually, but I know it's here. He found the concealed panel and opened it, revealing Ellen's surveillance equipment. Dad, look at this setup. Motion sensors, audio recording, digital storage. Mom was recording everything we did, everything we said. Does this seem normal to you? Ted sat down at the computer terminal and began typing. The good news is that most of the damaging files have already been removed. Mom's paranoid accusations, her wild theories about family theft. I've been protecting our family's reputation by destroying evidence, by eliminating false accusations. Ted's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. But there are still some files that could be misinterpreted. Let me show you. The screen displayed a directory of remaining surveillance files. Here, for example. Ted clicked on a video file. This shows me working in Austin's office space. Mom interpreted this as planting evidence, but I was actually organizing his paperwork to help him manage the family business. The video played, showing Ted placing documents in Austin's desk drawer. And this audio file, Mom recorded a private phone conversation where I discussed Austin's problems. With a family counselor, she thought I was planning to frame him, but I was actually seeking professional advice about his behavior. Austin stepped closer to the computer. Ted, that's not what the recordings show. Austin, the recordings show exactly what Mom's paranoid mind wanted them to show. Ted's fingers continued working across the keyboard, and I could see file icons disappearing from the directory. The problem is that even false accusations can damage reputations, so I've been systematically removing anything that could be misunderstood. You're deleting evidence. I'm protecting our family. Austin suddenly lunged toward the keyboard. Dad, he's erasing everything. Ted shoved Austin away from the computer. Stay back. Stop deleting the files. These files are poison, Austin. They're Mom's sick fantasies about our family. In that moment, with Austin on the floor and Ted's hands back on the keyboard, my older son's mask finally slipped completely. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I took money from client accounts. Yes, I made sure Austin would be blamed for it. Yes, I've been managing Mom's surveillance system since she died. Ted's voice was cold, matter of fact. But you know what, Dad? I'm not apologizing. Austin was a loser who would have wasted his inheritance anyway. Those bank clients were dying regardless. Their money was just sitting there while they forgot they had it. And Mom? Ted paused his typing and looked directly at me. Mom was going to destroy everything I'd built. She had to be stopped. Agent Brennan's voice crackled in our earpieces. Full confession recorded. All unit move in now. The front door burst open. Beat 10. Justice and resolution. 628, 630 words. FBI agents filled the house within seconds, professional and efficient. Ted looked up from the computer terminal with genuine surprise, as if he'd forgotten anyone else might be listening. Theodore Mitchell, you're under arrest for bank fraud, elder abuse, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. Agent Brennan read him his rights, while two other agents secured the surveillance equipment. Ted's response was almost casual. I assume you've been recording this conversation? Yes, sir. Then I suppose there's no point in pretending anymore. Ted looked at me with something approaching relief. Dad, I want you to know that I never intended for things to go this far. Which things? Any of it. The client accounts, framing Austin, Mom's death. It started small and just escalated. Austin pulled himself up from the floor. Ted, did you kill Mom? I helped her die faster. She was already sick, already dying. I just accelerated the timeline. How? Digitalis, easy to obtain through estate planning clients who had heart conditions, increased her regular medication dosage over 3 weeks. Agent Brennan looked up from her notes. You're confessing to murder. I'm confessing to mercy killing. Mom was suffering, and she was about to destroy our entire family with her paranoid accusations. The agents led Ted toward the door, but he stopped and turned back to me. Dad, I know you won't believe this now, but everything I did was to protect our family's reputation and financial security. By stealing and murdering? By making hard decisions you were too weak to make? Austin stepped between us. Ted, you destroyed our family to hide your own crimes. Don't pretend it was noble. Austin, you'll always be a failure. At least now you'll have an excuse for it. Those were the last words my older son spoke before Agent Brennan escorted him from the house. The investigation moved quickly after Ted's confession. Federal bank examiners discovered the full scope of his embezzlement: 37 elderly clients, total theft of $1.2 million over 4 years. Austin's name was cleared within 48 hours, and the charges against him were formally dismissed. Ellen's body was exhumed for additional toxicology testing. The results confirmed digitalis poisoning at levels consistent with intentional overdose. Ted was charged with first-degree murder, federal bank fraud, elder abuse, and evidence tampering. Facing life in prison without parole, he ultimately pled guilty to all charges in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. The hardest part was rebuilding trust with Austin. "Dad, I don't expect forgiveness," he told me during one of our early conversations after Ted's arrest. "You had evidence against me, and I couldn't provide a reasonable explanation. You made the decision any rational person would make. I should have trusted my son over documents." "You did trust your son. You just trusted the wrong one." Austin's reintegration into life took months. The FBI helped him establish a new identity and find temporary housing while he rebuilt his credit and employment history. I offered him money, a place to stay, immediate help, but he declined. "Dad, I need to do this on my own. I need to prove to myself that I can rebuild without family money." "What about the family business? Sell the properties, donate the proceeds to homeless shelters." I think that's what Mom would have wanted. 6 months after Ted's arrest, Austin had found work as an IT consultant and was renting a small apartment downtown. We had dinner once a week, carefully rebuilding a relationship that had been destroyed by lies. He never moved back into the family house. "Too many painful memories," he explained. "I'd rather build something new." The FBI's investigation led to policy changes at Pacific Northwest Bank and additional charges against 2 managers who had failed to detect Ted's systematic theft from elderly clients. I kept Ellen's surveillance equipment, though I never used it again. Some secrets once revealed should be allowed to rest. Beat 11. Epilogue and New Mission, 453, 450 words. 2 years later, I volunteer 3 afternoons a week at Portland Rescue Mission, the same shelter where I found Austin sleeping among strangers. The work is harder than I expected, not physically, but emotionally. Every person there has a story, and many of those stories involve family betrayal, lost trust, systems that failed them when they needed help most. Austin sometimes joins me for the dinner service on Sundays. He never talks about his own time at the shelter, but I see how the residents respond to him with respect, recognition, the unspoken understanding between people who've survived similar circumstances. "Dad," he told me recently, "I don't regret the 3 years on the streets." "How can you say that?" "Because it taught me things I couldn't have learned any other way. About resilience, about the difference between falling down and giving up, about which kinds of help actually matter." Ted serves his life sentence at Oregon State Penitentiary. He's written me several letters, all of them following the same pattern, expressing regret for the misunderstandings that led to our family's problems, suggesting that with proper perspective, we could move past this unfortunate situation. I don't respond. Austin and I discussed whether we should visit Ted, whether family loyalty demands some form of ongoing relationship. "Dad, Ted made his choices deliberately over years, knowing exactly who would be hurt. That's not a mistake or a misunderstanding. That's a character decision." "Do you think he can change?" "I think he can learn to fake remorse more convincingly." So we don't visit. We don't write. We don't send money or family photographs or updates about our lives. But we do remember Ellen. Last month, Austin and I installed a memorial garden at the shelter, using plants from Ellen's favorite nursery. The plaque reads, "In memory of Ellen Mitchell, who believed in truth above comfort." "She would have liked this," Austin said as we planted the last rose bush. "How do you know?" "Because she spent her final months investigating fraud and collecting evidence, even when she knew it might destroy our family. She chose truth over peace." People sometimes ask me how I could have been so wrong about my own sons, how I could have trusted the guilty one and rejected the innocent one. The answer is simpler than they expect. I believed the evidence that was presented to me, and I trusted the son who seemed more credible. The lesson isn't about being more suspicious of your children. It's about understanding that some people are capable of systematic deception over years, and that family love doesn't automatically confer the wisdom to detect it. If you're listening to this in Portland, Oregon, consider volunteering at the downtown shelter. You might just help save a family. And if you've ever misjudged someone you love, share this story. Sometimes the truth takes years to surface, but it always does.